Hello, everybody. It's been a while since I did one of these off the cuff from the car video updates for you guys. I am always busy with the kids and hidden Kentucky stuff, ancient Kentucky. Uh, I had to ring in on the Candace Owens versus Andrew Wilson situation. I did an objective analysis. I took the entire transcript of 3 hours and 11 minutes, and I gave it to the GPT-5. I told it wasn't allowed to use its previous biases, and I've broken down my AI to where it knows when I say that I mean it. And to just look at fallacies, just look at argument, rhetoric, really think about different points that are being made. In my opinion, both of them lost. Candace Owens lost the patina that she had with a lot of people that she competently could articulate the position of Tyler Robinson being a patsy, or more specifically, a guilty patsy, like a Lee Harvey Oswald, the classic guilty patsy. Andrew Wilson lost a lot of credibility as a master debater. I've always said that he's a 7 out of 10 in the first place. He's mostly a bully. He over relies on what he considers the laws of logic, which is a euphemism, right? These are not physical laws. They are just classical conjectures that have existed for a long time, so we call them laws. He's also mean. He's not very likable as a person. He throws around his Christianity, but sometimes he doesn't seem to be as ethical as he's saying. Fine, though. Okay, so she has fallen off a few months ago in terms of trustworthiness. She's clearly too emotional, too close to the case, potentially receiving too much money, in this case $300,000. Can we trust her for this discussion? Probably not. Nevertheless, I had it analyzed. She wins the debate 6 out of 10 versus his 5.5 out of 10. I've got the document. If people want it, I put it up on my pCloud public. I am concerned with the way that it's polarizing people. They think that their side was overwhelmingly proved or disproved. The other side is evil. I've seen a lot of comments like, Candace Owens is evil. Well, they're both making money. He's behaving as a mercenary for Turning Point USA, the new Turning Point USA. And she's failing to articulate why in the world Israel would want to kill its golden boy. When you invest hundreds of millions of dollars into somebody, you don't just immediately kill them because they're having a few doubts and a couple little texts. That's not what happens. This operation, first of all, I want people to understand it must have been planned for a while. It was certainly preceding his texting. Secondly, what we know is that the audio ballistics, the anatomical ballistics, and the kinetic ballistics do not match the official story. They don't work. They just don't. I don't know if people don't like that or they want to make exceptions, but we can look to the JFK assassination. We can look at frangible rounds. We can look at how projectiles work, and they just don't match. What most matches is a low caliber, like a 32 ACP palm pistol from a low grade angle, aiming up. Okay, if you get shot in the C5 at an angle down, you're not going to get hit in the C2. Probably more like C4 through T2. Nevertheless, setting aside audio ballistics and the lack of a gap and setting all that aside, there is just as much circumstantial web of stink around this as there is circumstantial evidence for a conviction. But in a case of death penalty, which I'm a believer in capital punishment, in a case of death penalty, you need to establish beyond a reasonable doubt. Andrew Wilson could not do that. That's the real primary reason that he lost this debate. He did not say, by his own admission, upwards of 25% doubt. By his own admission. Moreover, he used a lot of opinion and his own form of emotions and played a lot of rhetorical games with her that amounted to, I can do it, but you can't. She also, because she's so down the rabbit hole in her direction, did a bad job of establishing the facts and laying out the evidence because it's a giant swirl of different, it's like a conspiracy web, just like the meme, all the conspiracy web everywhere. So the document sits through, it lays out where they were gaslighting, various types of fallacies that they use. They both used about the same amount of fallacies, just different ones. They have different preferred fallacies they like to use to smear their opponents. They both played the game of posturing as the expert when we're talking about a pair of amateurs. And I'm not saying I'm an expert either, but I'm not out there testifying. There ought to be some scientist who works in ballistics who will come forward and explain this. The fact that still no one is talking about the high-speed drone that's on footage, primary raw footage, located still on X.com, that's an issue. 1 second. Us good libertarians, we still pay our taxes, you know? So, this was a disappointment. If anybody lost other than those two, it would be the entire right, the MAGA movement, whatever you want to say. I'm disappointed for a numerous amount of reasons, but the main thing is that, once again, going back to one of my last videos, is the sheer camaraderie of people not relying on the scientific method in the modern day. I've coined a new word for this because it's backwards and retarded. I would call it T-Rards. They both made themselves out to be what they were not. He was a mercenary there to hatchet at her. Her team and legal team set her up to where she couldn't be hatcheted. He tried anyways. There's an entire machine. Maybe it's founded by Israeli money. I don't really care if it's just Keep USA. But they're out to make her out to be an evil witch. And people are falling for it because, of course, there's a massive amount of anti-feminism and sometimes outright misogyny. Meanwhile, on her end, there is not enough cold rational deduction and emotionless, while albeit passionate, deductive and inductive analysis based on the primary evidence. For example, she's talking about the degradation of the fingerprint. If it's still the number one piece of evidence, the DNA and the fingerprint is still the most, then the degradation isn't really as important. The question is, what is the most primary DNA and fingerprint evidence? I do not debate that he owned that weapon. I debate that that weapon was ever present at all. I believe that it was provided, and he was assured, he and his family were assured that he would later be capable of getting off. Of course, lied to, because the state has every reason, the government has every reason to convict the guilty patsy, put him to death. Nobody ever gets to talk to him, just like Charles Manson, right? Hardly ever anybody got to talk to Manson. Manson never even killed anybody, but nevertheless, they put him away forever. There's a reason why they did that. So, I don't think anyone really won. I don't think any justice for Charlie Kirk has been done in the case of this debate. It was about money, debate money, prestige, backdoor money. I don't criticize Patrick Bet-David for how he moderated the debate. It's his choice to sit back and let them slug it out. I think he appreciates the alpha-ness of it. It's a little bit hilarious watching Adam Sosnick pretend to be capable of really judging this debate, considering how poorly he did only a few short months ago. I think he's probably happy to see this situation overshadow his unfortunate situation. But I don't know what you thought watching it, but all I saw was a lot of excessive posturing. People are saying, "Well, it wasn't a debate." No, it was a debate. Um, the legal hamstrings did a lot to keep the debate from going the way it should have, and neither side completely held, but clearly Andrew Wilson violated the premises of the debate far more than Candace, and she was far less willing to talk about things and claiming that she didn't want to get into legal pickles. The problem is, where was that concern before? If you're really doing the job of an investigative journalist, she should have been doing all that investigation. I've mentioned this before, in the background and providing it at the time of trial. Presenting herself then as an investigative journalist, sort of a was that movie Starlight, or where they uncover the priests. If that's the role that she's playing, but she is obviously making money from clicks. I'm not saying that's her primary motivation. Her love for her friend is fine. I'm not okay with outright attacking the wife of the deceased. But there is something wrong with that situation, and it does need to be talked about now that we know a little bit more. Certainly her connections to the CIA, her acting or failure to act, her bizarre behaviors are all noteworthy. But nobody's talking about life insurance money, so where is the motivation? If we're going to talk about life insurance money, then we need to talk about the real motives. If it is Israel and not, say, the CIA, who does this kind of stuff all the time, and not a secret society that is out to make a sacrifice of a white hetero Christian male, which is what I would contend is the primary motivation here, is that he was a linchpin in a very certain world order that is under attack. If we're not going to do that, then we'd better have an extremely good reason why Israel would want to throw away their multi-$100 million golden boy. And that's not been established. Nevertheless, the one thing I can tell you with any sort of certainty is that Charlie Kirk was not killed by a 30-06 at 270 yards at a 9 to 12 degree angle. It just didn't happen that way. How it happened, I have no answer. And I'm not going to pretend to have the answer there. I could just tell you what the science tells us. Bullets precede their sounds, and there's a calculable gap in the rapport. And the anatomy is not going to change. If you're shooting down at an angle, it's going to continue to go down. It's not going to suddenly go up, especially a 30-06 round. If these things disturb you, or you have a problem with it, I apologize that you're disturbed and you have a problem with it. But I'm not going to not mention it. That would be an injustice to Charlie, in my opinion, all by itself. Stay safe.